Welcome Home, a podcast for veterans, about veterans by veterans, is a project of Willing Warriors and the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run.
Good morning. I'm your host, Larry Ziliox, Director of Culinary Services here at the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run. And this morning I'm joined by our co-host, who's been traveling a bit, but we're happy to have him sit in for this one. John, how are you?
I'm good, Larry. It's good to be back, and thanks for inviting me along again.
Yeah, so this week our guest is Paul Morando. He is the Chief Curator at the National Museum of the United States Army. And I just want to talk a little bit about Paul's background because I find some of the things very interesting. One, you've been with the museum since the opening in 2020, and previously he had been at a museum in New York, Fort Hamilton, New York. And then one of my favorite museums is the Casement Museum down in Fort Monroe, Virginia. And for our listeners here in Virginia, if you're going to be going down to the shore and going down to Virginia Beach, this is the exit right before you go into the tunnel. And it's off to the left there. It's a casement. It's a wonderful museum to visit. It's really, really interesting. I will say it's an active installation, so visit it on your way down. Don't try to go through the gate with all the fireworks that you picked up in North Carolina. I encourage everybody who might be vacationing down there this summer to check it out. We're going to get into a number of really cool things that the museum has got going, one of which is this brand new exhibit called Call to Arms, the Soldier in the Revolutionary War. I saw a piece on the news about this, and it looked fascinating. So, Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Paul, I just had one question, too. I failed to mention that you were prior service. Was in Army Reserves from, looks like, 96 to 2003 as a photographer for public affairs. So my first question is, why the Army and not the Air Force?
Well, so interesting question. After, I would say during college, I wanted to do something. I wanted to join the Army. My uncle served, my grandfather served, so I just kind of wanted to follow in their footsteps to some degree. But also something new. Photography, broadcast journalism was quite interesting to me. Although I didn't have aspirations to become a journalist, but doing that in the Army intrigued me, and I'm really glad I did it. Gained a lot of experience and a lot, helped in my career as a curator as well.
Mm-hmm. So let's start by getting some definitions out there. One is, what does the chief curator do?
So my job is to manage the historic collection of the museum, also manage all the exhibits that are within it. So I'm responsible for all the curatorial content, the exhibit content, the information for the artifacts in the entire museum. So I would, along with my team, determine, how do we tell the Army story through exhibits? How do we interpret Army history? And in some ways, develop or create, visitor experience when they do come to the museum. What are they learning about, and how are they learning about the history?
Mm-hmm. Who decides what should be on exhibit? Because I'm assuming that your collection of artifacts is larger than your capacity to display them all. So is this something a group decides, like a board, or how is the process to pick what rifles should go in, what backpack should go in, what stories should be told?
Yes. Well, yeah, the Army does. We have a very robust collection, nearly 500,000 objects in the entire Army's collection. So we have a lot to pull from, telling different stories. But the museum as a whole, like the permanent galleries, you have historians, curators, Army historians, that kind of determined what I would say the major themes of the museum should be. And ultimately, it focuses on the individual soldier and their experience throughout Army's history. Now, when you develop new exhibits or new ideas that, whether they're temporary exhibits or, changing galleries and things like that, it's ultimately left up to me and my team into figuring out what stories we want to tell. And then once we have an idea of what we want to do, kind of get sort of approval from leadership that this is the direction we're going to go. And then we start figuring out what artifacts would make sense. And then from there is that you develop the storyline. So it's a combination of sort of internal and external groups trying to figure out, why we want to tell this story and how would it resonate with the public.
So, are there any artifacts on loan to the museum?
Yes. So if we're, staying specific to this new Revolutionary War exhibit, there are close to 180 artifacts that are on loan from various museums, organizations, and collectors. So we had to work very closely and we're partnered with almost 35 different institutions to bring in the number of loans for this exhibit. So it was sort of this great, I think, way to kind of partner with other museums. A lot of loan agreements that we had to process, a lot of back and forth in terms of the length of the loan, the care for these objects. I mean, these are 18th century artifacts that some require a lot of care and conservation. Also, how do you move some of these objects? Some come from, France, England, Canada. And so navigating through that was tricky, but important because of the stories that these artifacts tell and how much it adds to this exhibit.
So thinking about that new exhibit, which it looks phenomenal, just so our listeners get an understanding of what it takes to put something like that together, I'm pretty sure there's a few people out there that say, "Oh, they decided last week, let's get a bunch of uniforms together. We'll slap them on some mannequins. Here's a musket, and we're good to go." But it sounds as though, with all the coordination, with all the getting the items to you, putting it all together, how long from inception to opening it to the public? What kind of time frame are we talking about?
Yeah, it took about 4 years from beginning to end to put this together. So, from the initial conception, the idea of what we wanted to do, to realizing that we can actually do this, it's a process. You have to first lock in, if you can get, the artifact. This exhibit is sort of an artifact-driven exhibit, meaning that the stories are told primarily through the objects. And we wanted to make sure that almost every artifact is tied directly to an individual soldier. We know who carried that musket. We know who wore the uniform. And those objects are harder to come by. So internally in the Army's collection, we do have a nice collection of Rev War material. The majority of them weren't tied directly to an individual soldier. So those artifacts are rare, hard to come by. They usually reside in museums or in homes of collectors. So we had to set out to kind of contact these folks, and they had to be willing to loan these objects, for 2 years. So once we realized we can do that, then we started to develop the storyline. We had to, of course, put a contract together to hire a designer and a fabricator for this exhibit. It's a 5,000 square foot exhibit.
Wow.
In a very unique space that required a specific design, construction of walls, and it's kind of like building a house. You also have to electrical requirements. You have to look at ADA compliance. Yeah, you're right. It's not as simple as just putting an object in a case There's so many different variables to make it a successful exhibit.
Hey, Paul, this is John. Appreciate you coming on. Just want to let you know, I'm glad you didn't join the Air Force like Larry, just for our listeners out there. But, there's only one good branch out of this, and that's Navy. So go Navy, beat Army,
Oh,
right?
my God. Oh, boy. Here we go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just had to throw that out there.
it's fine. Hey, I mean, the French Navy helped us during the Revolutionary War, so that's one way to look at it.
Good one, good one. Oh man, well, sounds like you've done some amazing work here, and it looks like you call to arms the soldier in Revolutionary War. You just opened that for the Army's 250th anniversary. I was fortunate to actually go to the Army 250th parade, and just seeing some of those them old uniforms and the gear and everything that these guys are wearing. Did you guys have any I guess did you guys help out with those uniforms for those individuals, or was that just all done by like the active duty Army folks for the parade?
No, the Army has those already in place. So like the old guard, they have units that already have those type of reproduction uniforms to display, to showcase to the public. And yeah, and they put on an amazing performance, and when they're marching, and they're very involved in obviously in their own history.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they visit. We've had them at the museum. I think at the opening of the exhibit, we had a few members of the old guard and the Army band performing. So yeah, they're very rooted in their own history, which is great to see.
Yeah, they really are. And, actually seeing it in a museum and on TV or in a book or in a photo, and then actually seeing someone wearing them in this day and age, it was very impressive. Kind of made me feel like I was back in time. At just how sharp they looked and how well taken care of. So they do really try to do that. And speaking of that, I'm assuming actually Larry already talked about this. I wanted to kind of follow up with it. So you had mentioned something about reaching out to folks that have served or had family members serve in different generations, and then you guys asked if they can bring that on for 2 years. Is that a correct statement?
Yes. So mostly working with other museums, essentially around the world that have Revolutionary War collections, and also individual collectors. There are a lot of collectors out there who've done a great job acquiring this material. And so we had to reach out to them, talk with curators and historians to see if they want to be a part of this exhibit for the full 2 years. So, a lot of that involves actually having to visit these individual museums or individual collectors to look over their material, also to validate that what they have is indeed original Revolutionary War artifacts. And so that was just a great process, because I learned so much, not only about the revolution, but about the material culture, flags, uniforms, buttons, muskets. It's amazing how many people out there have, it's just this rich collection of material. And I was just blown away by, how much stuff was actually out there, and also how willing they were to contribute to this exhibit.
Wow. Yeah.
That's good stuff. On the follow-up question on that, so just for, our listeners, if someone was interested in getting connected with you and might have something like this, and we have listeners all around the world, so is there a process that you could share if you're in need of something?
Sure. I mean, if there's artifacts they're willing to donate or loan, whether it's for future exhibits or even just to add to the Army's collection, they can go to our website and just sort of track a general email for us to inquire about that. That's, I think, www.namusa.org. Yeah, so that'll be a first starting point for folks like that.
So, listeners, that webpage is THENMUSA.org, and that stands for the National Museum, United States Army. So, again, it's THENMUSA.org. musa.org. I encourage everybody in our area, especially in our area, to go to the museum. It's down near Route 1 in Fairfax County Parkway. It's right on the back end of Fort Belvoir. And if for no other reason, go down and take a look at this building. This building is beautiful. I happened to be lucky enough to be invited to a tabling event there last year. And the building is just gorgeous. The exhibits are really something. The gift shop is one of the finest gift shops that the Army has. Let me tell you, this has got everything you need for your enthusiast relative and you're looking for a Christmas present or something. So it's open 9 to 5 daily. And of course, the weekends are the busiest. There's plenty of parking, guaranteed. But you want to go down and you want to see the building and you want to see the collection and you want to see this new exhibit. I'm looking forward to going down and seeing it in person. I did see it on the news a little bit. I guess one of the questions that comes to my mind is that this is brand new in June. Takes 4 years or so to develop. It's a 2-year exhibit. So that means you've got something planned to replace it in 2 years that maybe you've been working on for 2 years. Can you give our listeners a hint of what might be up next?
Yeah, that's a great question. For that particular space, I don't have anything concrete lined up yet. Before we developed this Revolutionary War exhibit, typically we brought in sort of already established traveling exhibits. So prior to the Revolutionary War exhibit, which is the first time that internally we developed this exhibit as the Army Museum, beyond the permanent galleries. So that's why it took so long to do, because we developed everything from scratch. We had to work with a designer, a fabricator, collect all those artifacts, as I mentioned. So more than likely, to kind of lessen the sort of the stress and the workload, we will probably work with sort of outside museums to bring in sort of a traveling exhibit. So prior to the Rev War exhibit, we did something on the 80th anniversary of D-Day. It was this sort of interactive, iPad-based, exhibit. And so we're probably going to sort of do some things on a smaller scale, at least for when close this exhibit in 2027. And that's not to say we're not working on other projects or other exhibits. We are. We are going to launch our first traveling exhibit in February of 2026 on the Nisei soldiers, the Japanese-American soldiers who fought during World War II.
Wow.
So that will be, which is a major exhibit, it's going to travel around the United States. So that's one project we're working on. The next, more smaller exhibit that will go on our third floor will honor the 25th anniversary of 9/11, which will be obviously September of next year. So, yeah, so we're working on that, and that'll be something new probably in late summer of 2026. So, yeah, for the larger, bigger, sort of 5,000 square foot exhibit, that space, sometimes what we do is we break it up. We have the ability to make it smaller. We have some flexibility in doing that. So we probably won't have a major exhibit after the Rev War closes, because of the time and effort to do that. But we're certainly going to bring some new stories to the museum.
So is there a chance that at the end of this 2-year period that this will turn into a traveling exhibit, or do you really have to give pretty much everything back?
Yeah, that's hard. We thought about doing that. You're right. The majority of those loans have to go back to those institutions.
Yeah.
Very hard to travel, 18th century material. They're more fragile.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And plus the institutions, they want, their objects back. Some of them are going to go back earlier than that. So for your listeners, if you want to see, and all the stuff is really cool, but if you want to really see some of the, the premier pieces, I would encourage they come before December of 2025. There are some items that have to go back to their institutions after being on display for 6 months. One of them is George Washington's sword that came to us from the Smithsonian Museum of American History.
Wow.
So this is his famous green-hilted sword. Ones you see on him during portraits. It was his most favored sword during the war, and it's currently on display. But that will be going back to the Smithsonian sometime in December.
Is there a reason why they only gave it to you for such a short period?
Well, it's such an important piece to their collection. So they don't want it to be out longer than that. Typically, museums loan sort of sensitive objects like textiles or clothing or flags for a limited period of time to reduce the time that it's on display, right? The lights, could, if it's not properly controlled, could be damaging to the artifact. But for the Smithsonian, I think they want to use it in their own exhibit or their own way to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the United States, right? The big for next year. So that's probably what they're thinking, and other organizations are thinking that as well. So they, some of these are their treasures, right? They're pieces in their collection. So they don't want it to be gone for such a long time.
Yeah.
But we're thankful for the Smithsonian. We're thankful for all the other institutions, whether it's 6 months, a year, or 2 years. Just having their objects are very important to us.
Yeah, and I can understand why they would want that back, right? I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there that not just from the value of it, but history and monetary, but there's a lot of folks that probably go from around the world and want to see these artifacts, right? So they got to put it back in its home so it's available to everybody and not on a special, exhibit somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So to get these special pieces from these museums, is there a lot of horse trading going on? Do you have to pony up, I don't know, some Hitler wig or something to get them to give you something?
Yes and no. It's more about building relationships. Of course, in the future, if they need an artifact from the Army's collection, that obviously we'd be more willing to help because they helped us early on. But for the majority, it really isn't about that. It was really wanting to be part of this landmark exhibit. You got to remember, this is, for many, some of these objects are being put on display for the very first time, certainly all together in one exhibit. So I think for the majority of, I would say, institutions, to include the Smithsonian and collectors, they just want to be part of it, right? They wanted to showcase their artifacts in this special exhibit. But there are organizations, and it makes sense to want to partner with the Army because they know of our rich sort of military collection, and I think it's great that if they loan objects to us, in response, we can loan some of our great pieces to them as well. It not only helps their museum, but it helps the Army and people knowing that, whether it's a weapon or whatever it may be, came from the Army and it's on loan for this exhibit. So yeah, it's also good, sort of professional development and support of a variety of different museums. But you mentioned, but it's also a lot of negotiating back and forth as well. There are some organizations who weren't willing initially to loan these objects, but then when they see other museums or they see what the size and scope of this exhibit is, what it's all about, they were more willing to open up and then enter into that sort of loan process and that negotiation. So some of it took a while. There were some that worked on for over a year to get a yes from an organization and other organizations. And you just gotta, just keep up and just keep talking to them. And but I like that process. I like, the thrill of the hunt to finding these artifacts. The back and forth, and then finally being successful.
Yeah. Wow. Well, listeners, You got to go see this museum. I mean, it's really something. The building is beautiful. The collection is amazing. This is 65,000 square feet of exhibits. So, plan on maybe a full day, maybe two,
Easily.
because there's a lot to see. And also, when you talk about military museums or museums in general, this area is a target-rich environment. Everything from the Marine Corps Museum, the Army Museum, the Cold War Museum at Vint Hill is fascinating. It's small, but it's really got a lot of artifacts, and there's some great stories in there. You've got the Americans in Wartime Museum, which will be coming, which is the old tank farm that we would set up a table at every year. They're not doing it this year because they're moving their tanks and heavy artillery and everything else they got to the actual site. So hopefully that'll be open soon. But if you planning a vacation, you want to come to Northern Virginia, to D.C., there is a tremendous amount to do here. And these museums should be on your list of stops, because especially if you're a veteran and you want to go and you want to take your family and you want to show them, hey, I remember going with friends and relatives to different museums and saying, you see that? I had to wear that flak vest, that leftover stinky flak vest from Vietnam. I had to wear that. And then I had to carry that. And you see that radio with that big antenna? It would get caught in the jungle and I'd fall on my butt. And your friends and relatives will get a real understanding of what your service meant and what you went through to do that. And there's no bigger tribute to our service members and our active duty soldiers today than the amount of work, the amount of thought, and what the whole team at the Army Museum has put into this facility, this museum. It's outstanding. And, Paul, I don't think we can thank you enough for the time and the dedication that you all and your staff and everybody down there puts in to make this such an amazing place. So if you would, please pass on our thank you to your staff and to everybody else, because it's a special place. And I wasn't even in the Army, but I do really like it down there. So yeah, please tell everybody we really appreciate all the work that they do.
Sure, definitely. Thank you for saying that.
Well, one last question. Do you think AI will have an impact on museums of the future and how you do your job?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe a tough question to answer now. I will say that no AI was used in the development of the museum's exhibits, certainly not the Red War exhibit. We did it the old school way, and research and reading and writing. But there, I would imagine there are institutions who are looking into the use of AI in terms of developing exhibit content, developing, writing and things like that. A bit old school when it comes to that. I think you have to do the proper research, bring in all different perspectives and ideas, and I don't know how you can replace that with AI.
Yeah.
To me, I think it's disingenuous. I think you have to put the time and effort, and you're going to get, to me, a better product. Now, there may be some helpful resources or helpful things that AI can do to speed up certain things. My team and I haven't really looked at that at all. But it's an interesting conversation that museums are going to, I think, start looking into, and if they haven't already. But certainly at the National Army Museum, we're not ready yet to do that. So, but I'd be fascinating to see where where museums go and how they deal with AI.
I kind of think that it'll have more of an impact on the back of the house than really the exhibits themselves. I would still want that human interaction and that human touch in developing the story and the layout and everything like that. But when it comes to the curating the collection and just keeping track of everything and looking for connections between something that you have in a collection and somebody wants to donate, and all of a sudden the AI is able to say, hey, we have this over here, and that was probably the same year and the same place and the same unit that piece just got donated, and there's a connection there. So hopefully it stays like that, and it just doesn't replace people, because I don't think you and your team can be replaced by a machine. I think things would be too boring. I think you just put stuff in cases and it would write up a nice, using proper grammar, a nice little story about it, but that would be about it. So, well, listen, thank you. I can't thank you enough for coming on and telling us all about the museum. Again, listeners, the webpage is thenmusa.org. And one last thing, I just want to confirm this, and I'm almost certain it's free to get in, right? There's no charge to get in.
Absolutely. Total free museum, free parking, and we're open 364 days a week from 9 to 5. So, yes, you can come at any time during those hours. And we also have free programming throughout. Depending on the day, there's all different types of, lectures, book talks, and online programs, and everything that is free to the public.
Wow. Well, great. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
For our listeners, we'll have another episode next Monday morning at 0500. You can find us on most podcast platforms. We're also on YouTube and Wreaths Across America Radio. Thanks for listening.
The Welcome Home podcast is brought to you by Willing Warriors, a nonprofit organization serving active duty service members and veterans since 2012. To learn more, please visit our webpage at willingwarriors.org.